Welcome back to the Rebel Outpost. My name is David, and if you don't know, I'm building a secure homestead deep in the mountains, and I call it the Rebel Outpost. But today we're not going to talk so much about the Rebel Outpost or beekeeping or gardening or adventuring or Jeeps or Chevy K20s. We're going to talk about my housing evolution, how I got to this point, going all the way back to the beginning. Should be interesting, and I believe it's going to give you some insight into how you can get to building a homestead and living out if you'd like to, and you'll be able to do it quicker than I ever did and better than I did it if you watch this video to the end. So thanks for being here. Again, my name is David. I want to set the scene right here with a great quote from one of my subscribers and friend, Teddy K9619. Let me read you what he said. The year 26 is going to be the year of truth. Buckle up. Teddy, I couldn't agree with you more, and we're going to go with his theme for the year, and I'm going to start out by being completely truthful about my housing evolution and what led me to the exact point right now to sitting in this office, the Rebel Outpost headquarters, which is where you're watching this video, my office, tucked away right here in the middle of the property with windows so I can see everything, including the gate out front. So let's jump right in, or let's jump backwards. As a young man in America, I was turning 21 years old, and at that time I was still living at home, and I began to feel this sense of I'm behind, I'm not where I need to be. Let's just be honest. The year of truth. I felt like a loser. Why don't I have a house? Why am I not out of my parents' place? Why am I still at home? Now, one of my parents was encouraging me to stay at home, which is probably a good thing, but they didn't give me context. Or if they did, my 21-year-old brain did not understand the context. They didn't say, hey, you're not making a payment. You can save money to invest in the market or save or whatever. I didn't feel that advice go into my brain, and so therefore I just felt behind and like I needed to get out. And I think most people feel that way by the age 21. Leave me a comment below. How old were you when you moved out? Were you 21 or younger or older? And also, what would you encourage younger people to do in today's world? I think I know the answer to that. But at 21 years old, I very much felt behind, so I began looking for properties, and I saw a house that was listed in town. Somebody actually mentioned it to me. They said that's a pretty good deal. I went and looked at said house. It was 5 or 6 minutes from downtown, almost walking distance, easy drive to the square, which was nice. The price was reasonable, $195,000 for about 3,000 square feet of space. Now, that includes a 2-car garage. This house had an unfinished basement, and it had a brand new rectangle swimming pool, vinyl lined. So it was a value swimming pool, but it was deep, it was nice, and it had a diving board. It was concrete all the way around it, and the house had a back deck. All this for the price of $195,000. I thought that was a good deal. So did I buy the house? Well, 10 months after turning 21, I went to the bank, borrowed money, and I bought not one, not two, but I bought 3 homes. That's exactly right. I bought 3 homes 10 months after turning 21 years old. I went to a community bank. I applied for a loan based on income and savings and the amount of down payment. I was able to get a mortgage on the first house, and the other 2 homes, I took out a investment type loan that was offered by that bank based on either current rental revenue or projected rental revenue. So there I was 10 months after turning 21. I'm in the closing attorney's office. I close with the homeowners on the house that's going to be my house. I shake hands, close the deal, get a stack of paperwork, walk him out, and boom, more people walk in, and I go to another closing and close with them. Now, I only had 2 closings that day because 2 of the 3 houses, the investment houses, were on the same piece of property, so that was nice and that was convenient. So I walked away that day owning 3 pieces of property thinking, what am I going to do? Well, of course, I went to the house that was mine that evening. I went there alone. There was no big celebration. I walked in. I realized it needed to be remodeled. I went to sleep. I slept on the floor that night, and I woke up the very next morning, and I started ripping the carpet out and calling folks that I knew that knew how to do projects and work to come give me prices, and the work began immediately. And at the same time, I began work on the investment properties. But this is not about investing right now. This is about my housing journey. So I fixed that first house up. I finished the basement, and I lived there. Okay, had to check on something in the driveway. I lived there for about 6 months or a year, and then my best friend wanted to move out. He was living at home. He had a tough/aggressive dad. He was scared to move out. So we snuck over, and I moved him out, and I moved him into the basement that I had finished out. So I put a laundry room downstairs, a bathroom, had a big center room, and a bedroom off the side, finished all that out. And then eventually there was another 200 square foot area. We closed it in, put a glass door on it, put mirrors inside the room, rubber floor, and made a 200 square foot decked out gym. Free weights, barbells, treadmill, speed bag. And then out in the open area, we had a pool table, a competition. I believe it was a 9-foot pool table, burgundy in color. I believe it was a Brunswick table, if I remember correctly. Shooting pool was cool back then, right? At least we thought it was. And then we put French doors in, and that opened out onto the pool patio. Now, I thought I was really something. I didn't think it was the best thing in the world, but I thought I was on to something good. And indeed, I was. Living in that house was a blessing, but I needed to generate some income. I was only charging my good buddy around $250 a month to live in the basement, which was a very good deal, I thought, but maybe it was the going rate at the time. And then what did I do? Or maybe he and I, we got the harebrained idea to get a third roommate, and we moved in a girl. The first and last time I ever moved a girl in like that, because sometimes girls and guys living together just don't go so well together. But the house served me well. It was a lot of fun, and it was convenient. That was my first house. Now, while owning that house and living there, I fixed up the other investment properties I told you about, and then I realized that my goal was going to be to acquire property. Lacking all the knowledge I needed at the time, I wasn't sure my exact path, but I knew quantity was as important as quality and vice versa. So I acquired a lake home during this time, and I began to acquire some office space during this time. Not large, but leasable office space that I could have. And that's going to be important because as we head forward a few more years, the Great Recession of 2008 happens, and I have a decision to make. I think my buddy had moved out at this point, and I had to either keep paying for this house, and I had a dog. He and I had a dog together, and I opted to sell the house. So I put the house up for sale, and I went from that house, 3,000 square feet, 2-car garage, and a swimming pool in town, downsized to a 1-bedroom apartment. That's exactly right. Took everything, crammed it into that apartment that I could, and I moved over there, and I was happy about it. And then I sold the first home I ever bought, and in all transparency, that is the only real estate deal I ever lost money on. So it was 2008. I wasn't sure what was going on. Being young, I thought, hey, I need to sell this because I'm paying a lot of money. I no longer have roommates, and my income has dipped because I was in sales, essentially. With that said, I sold the house at a loss, the only loss I've ever taken on a deal. Now, I've lost money on new vehicles. If you buy a new vehicle, you're going to lose some money by trading and buying new. But on real estate, that was the only deal I ever lost money on. It took me $10,000 of loss to sell that house. I had to take a second note out with the bank and pay that back monthly, which I did. Now, at this point, you might be asking, how did he buy these 3 houses? I did not have a cosigner. I had a little bit of money saved up for a down payment. And back then, the down payment was much lower than it is now. And the requirements were more lax. And business was more community, hence the name Community Bank. Thank goodness for those community banks. They help people get loans for homes, offices, and business. Man, I miss those days. But so now I've gone from my first house that I loved, did a lot of landscaping at, did a lot of work, and then I moved to a 1-bedroom apartment, and I let my buddy take the dog that we had adopted from the shelter, a older black lab. We named her Sexy Bee. I don't know. We liked rap music. We thought that was a good name. When little kids were around, we just said her name was B. So the recession happens, and I had my lake house that I had acquired, and I had a tenant in that house, and the tenant stopped paying me. I went to high school with them. They got $2,000 behind in rent. I had to evict them. It was a very bad situation. I think they had a drinking problem. It was my fault for letting them get that far behind, but they were a friend. They got that far behind, and I remodeled that lake house that I had, and I moved up there. That was exciting at first, but here's the thing. The lake house I moved to was an A-frame, and it was probably about 900 to 1,100 square feet of space, bedroom on the top, big glass wall on the back, and a gas fireplace. Kind of small, kind of dated, built in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was 25 minutes roughly to downtown. So I went from living 5 minutes from downtown to living 25, 28 minutes, a big change. And the neighbors around me were really close in. So I was happy to be living on the lake, but it was a shallow cove, close neighbors in a dated house. But I made the best of it. So I lived there for a while. I had friends out, but it just felt far out and I felt disconnected from everyone. And that was kind of tough. I had people visit, but the shallow cove was often dry that I was in. I did have a single slip boat dock, but it just was not the right setup for me. I never bought a boat or a jet ski to put up there. I never even went on the lake. I was working all the time, and the commute eventually started to get to me. So what did I do? I talked to a friend who had a condo in town, completely furnished, including silverware, everything you needed, and he wanted $850 a month to rent it. It was 2-story, it was 2-bedroom, 2-bath, it was convenient, and boom, I moved there. I released the lake house to someone else. I moved back in town, and I was cooking with fire. I was so happy to be back in this condo. Even though I was paying rent, it was good to be back in town. I was able to walk right out the front door, go for runs. I was close to work and the gym and friends again and restaurants and the grocery store. That was nice. So from 28-minute commute down to 4 or 5-minute commute, perfect. I liked it. And I did that for a little while. And then I got the idea to go ride my motorcycle for a while. So let me back up. I'm at the lake house and I decided to do my first big motorcycle trip. I had purchased a motorcycle while I was living in an apartment. I actually brought it inside, parked it in the lobby of my apartment and held on to it. That was another reason for moving to the lake house, was so that I could keep my motorcycle up there. I actually kept the motorcycle in the kitchen of my lake house. I wish I had a photo or video of that. I would post it if I did. I do have a picture of my first motorcycle, and funny story, when I left the lake house to head to the Keys, I had the F650 GS BMW 2007 or 8 model. I had it so loaded down that as I'm heading out the driveway, it wasn't a wheelie, but the front wheel started raising up off the ground, and so I just had to lean forward and use my chest and my weight and put it on the tank bag to hold the motorcycle down. I was overloaded, but I was set. I had my gloves on. I think it was cold. It was probably December, January. And I said, I'm not unpacking anything. I'll just throw stuff away when I get to my first stop. So I rode like Dumb and Dumber on their moped, right? I rode like this all the way down to basically Savannah that night. And then I threw stuff away and resituated. So my first big motorcycle trip came while I was at the lake house. I returned. I moved to that condo I told you about, the 2-bedroom, 2-bath. While living there, I decided I wanted to go on a big motorcycle trip. So at that time, I sold everything I had, everything, including what was in my pantry. I gave it away. One of my buddies came over. I just loaded his truck up full of boxes of seasonings and pastas and anything you can imagine in a pantry. And he gets home about an hour later. He calls me. And what does he say to me? He says, hey, my wife made me call. She says it's not normal for someone to give away all their items, especially their pantry items. She's worried about you. Are you okay? I said, I'm perfectly fine. I'm going to ride my motorcycle. And that's what I did. So after selling everything, I head out on my motorcycle. I ride out west. I head to California. I take a huge trip, and I'm probably gone about 2 or 3 months. And I return home, but I realized I had nowhere to go because I had moved out of my buddy's place and he had all the furniture and I'd sold all my stuff. So my dad says, you're welcome. I'm in my mid-20s at this point. He said, you're more than welcome to stay at the house for a while. I took him up on the offer. Very nice gesture on his behalf. I took him up on his offer. I moved home for probably 10 months. And in that time, I went out and bought a Dodge Ram truck, which was not exactly what I needed, but they were cool, right? I bought a Dodge Ram truck and I drove that truck around till one day I found a townhome community. I pull up, there's an old lady on her front porch and there's 6 townhomes all connected. She says, what are you doing in that big, nice truck? I said, I'm looking at this townhome next to you for sale. How much is it? She said, well, I don't know, but I got a key to it if you want to look in it. I said, sure thing. I parked the truck. This older lady, Carolyn, she tours me inside her neighbor who was not staying there. She tours me through her townhome, shows it to me, and she says, I think it's nice. You'd be a good neighbor. Why don't you buy it? I said, I might do that. I go home. I think it over for 24 hours. She's asking $159,000, actually $158,500. So $158,500, and it's 2,650 square feet. And there's a one-car garage inside of that unit. So 2,650 square feet for $158,000. I offered the lady $132,500. This was post 2008. Prices hadn't climbed yet. She took it. So lo and behold, I closed and I had a 2,600 square foot townhome, 2,650, to move into. And boy, was I excited. Moved in, furnished that place, bought a second motorcycle to ride around town, the R9T, the urban R9T, because I was an urban guy now with my townhome. So far I've lived in a large house with a basement and a pool. I've downsized to a one-bedroom apartment. I've moved to a lake house and lived there 28 minutes out of town. Didn't ever get a boat. I moved back into a condo that was completely furnished, paid rent to a friend of mine. I sold everything to go on a long motorcycle trip, came back, lived at home for nearly a year, and now I purchased this townhome. I'm so excited, lots of room. It even has an outdoor area. And this, let me tell you, townhome living was simple living. But here's what you find out after a couple of years. Your neighbors watch you. They look at you, especially older, nosy neighbors. No offense to old people, but a lot of them are nosy, and they watch and they see what you're doing. That's great when everybody's getting along. It's not so good if you're not getting along. But I had a blast there for about 3 or 4 years. I had remodeled my townhome. Even though it was relatively new, it was built in 2007. I still upgraded a lot of things, and it fit me like a glove, and it was easy living. I mean, easy living. Now, while here at this townhome, I do a lot of regional riding, and I take a few trips, long trips. I go to Nova Scotia during this time, and I just cover a lot of miles. In total, I rode 109,000 miles on 5 motorcycles over about 10 years. A lot of that happened from this townhome, and it really gave me insight to my state in the north part of Tennessee, North Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. I explored that almost every weekend and some weekdays with friends or solo on my motorcycle. So this was a great time in my life, but I was ready for a big trip, and I decided I was going to roll out on another big trip. So what did I do? I decided to sell everything again, which I did. Sold the truck, sold my sofas, sold my bed, sold everything I had, sold everything in the kitchen. And as I was planning this and getting the ball rolling and momentum, somebody across the street behind me comes over and says, hey, David, do you know anybody that would want to buy my townhome? And I said, how much do you want? Now, these townhomes are smaller. They're about 1,500 square feet, and they're a little older. They give me a price. I said, I know somebody will buy it, me. So I sell my townhome. I buy this townhome, and I'm getting ready to leave. I don't even have a vehicle. I had to borrow a vehicle for a while from someone, and I move a few boxes of stuff, and I put a few things of food in the refrigerator, and I put a mattress. I think I had a mattress or a sleeping bag. I put it on the second level, and I had no furniture. And for a couple months, I live in this townhome while I'm selling the rest of my stuff and finishing out some work tasks, preparing to go travel for a long period of time on my motorcycle. During this time, I'm sitting outside one day on the back of said vehicle, and a guy drives by and he goes, hey, David. And it was a guy I knew from my church. And he says, I'm looking for a place for my son to live. And I said, that's awesome. He goes, what's the deal with this one? I said, I just bought it. He said, would you want to sell it? I said, sure. So I tell him $20,000 more than I paid for it. He goes, sounds like a deal. So he says he'll close in 30 days. So now I've got to wait longer because I was about to leave. So I wait on the closing. The check clears. I deposit the extra money into my account. I now don't have anywhere to live, but I've got more money than I've ever had, and I don't have anything holding me back. So I get on my motorcycle and off I go for an extended motorcycle trip for adventure across the United States and Canada. Man, what an adventure I had. I'd done it before, but every time is a humongous adventure. I was stoked. And as they say, like all good things must come to an end. I went out on the road, and I'll share more stories if you're interested about my adventures, but I had a blast. I ate amazing food. I slept in lonely, scary places up in the mountains. I dropped my motorcycle. I met beautiful girls along the way. I saw old friends and made new friends, saw amazing sights, and mainly just rode my motorcycle, which I loved, adventure motorcycle riding. But while I'm traveling, I realize I've got goals. I've got things I need to do. What am I going to do? So I'm out on the road and I have nowhere to return to. I was fortunate enough to have a friend who leased 1-bedroom apartments. He said, I have one coming available in about a month, 3 weeks. Would you like me to hold it? I said, hold it. So when I came back, once again, I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment. I had to rent a storage space for my motorcycle to keep it out of the weather because I was very careful with my bike back then to some degree, and I had gear. But I had a 1-bedroom apartment again, which was great. So I'm starting to see a pattern here, right? Like I'm enjoying smaller space and less cost of living tied up in a home, because my perspective along the way was a home is never a good investment. More on that later, but I never viewed a home as a good investment. I viewed a home as a necessary cost of living back then. Now, I don't even know if I consider it that. We need somewhere to live, but that's another story for another day. My friend held the apartment. I came back and I planned to be in that apartment for a year. I made some upgrades to the apartment. I scraped the popcorn ceiling off because it was built in the 90s, and I modernized it a little bit. It had new carpet, which was great, new paint. I settled in. I actually stayed there a couple of years, actually 3.5 years. And it was a good experience. I liked small space of living. And while living there, I decided to take a venture down to the beach. I did. I went down to the Keys. My girlfriend at the time went with me. And on the way back up from our big trip down the Keys, we swung back through Tampa and we stopped at a Cracker Barrel, and I could see an RV place. And I said, why don't we go over there after we eat Cracker Barrel just to look around? We walk in the door of the Airstream Tampa dealer, and right in the center is a Base Camp X. It's a 2020 model, I believe, and it had a 3-inch lift, all-terrain tires, and man, oh man, it had red trim, which was my favorite color at the time. Now I think I'm into Hunter Orange or Blaze Orange. But I saw that base camp, and she'd been asking, I want to travel, I want to go with you, you're always on your motorcycle. I saw that base camp, and I was sold. I thought it's time to switch from adventure motorcycling over to something else. And here was the way to do it. A cool Airstream base camp, not the old classic looking ones, is what I thought. I didn't have a vehicle to pull it with. I did not have the Gladiator at this time, but I thought I'm going to go back and try to make it work. So I looked at it, didn't say anything, took a lot of photos, I toured it, and then we headed home. So after a few months, I get really, really sick, and I can't hardly get up off the sofa. Well, actually, let me back up. I got really, really sick, but I kept trucking along. I even went to eat Mexican food with my best friend and my girlfriend at the time, and they were giving me a hard time about being weak. I laid on the sofa. I think I had the C virus in March or February of 2020. It was early. And I went to the doctor, and they said, oh, it's upper respiratory infection. I couldn't get off the sofa for 11 days. If that was upper respiratory infection, I'm weak. So anyway, I get through that. While I'm there resting and recovering, I'm on the internet, and I strike up a deal for an Airstream base camp in North Carolina. I purchase it, and I decide to get a vehicle to go with it. I buy the Jeep Gladiator, and I go up, pick up the base camp, and we travel. That's our home, because at this point, I decided to go travel for a year in the base camp with my girlfriend. But I'm going to keep the apartment to be smart, right? Need a home base. So I've wisened up this time. So we leave for a year in the base camp, she and I, and the Jeep Gladiator with no lift on it, 35-inch tires, and the base camp, and we head out for a 1-year trip. As many of you know, we only made it 6 months because the base camp broke down so bad that I had to take it back to headquarters. But we had a grand adventure for 6 months, making it all the way out to California, going through the Badlands, going to Death Valley, made it out into California, Bishop, California, the best barbecue in the country. No offense to anybody in Georgia or the South, but the best barbecue I've ever had was Bishop, California. Real neat place. But we had to circle back because the base camp just couldn't make it. So we're living on the road for 6 months, and we go back to the mothership, to headquarters, to the Airstream place, and they say, hey guys, This thing's got to be completely rebuilt. Anyway, the story is in another video that I'll put right here. But they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want a different Airstream. They finally said, okay. They said it was November, late November. They said, we can't have it ready for you until sometime next year, maybe April. Is that okay? Sure. I get a U-Haul. I head back to Georgia with no Airstream. They've got my Airstream. They say they're going to build me a new one. So I head back and we go back and I get back to my apartment. I'm back in the 1-bedroom apartment and I hang out until April and they call me and they say, hey, are you ready for your Airstream Caravel? I said, yes. They said, well, you got 1 week to come get it. Now, one unique thing about this Airstream is that Airstream never lets anybody buy or pick up new Airstreams from headquarters. But this time it was mandated for whatever reason. So I had to go all the way back up there in April and pick it up, which was fine. I was very grateful. I go up there. As soon as I get the Airstream Caravel, I am ecstatic. And I go back out on the road for another 6 months out on the road living. So now I'm out on the road. I'm living in my Airstream Caravel for 6 months. And this is a grand adventure. I am seeing the world that I have seen before on motorcycle, but I'm slowing down, I'm staying, and I'm living a whole different existence. Instead of off-roading on my BMW GS, I am off-roading in my Jeep Gladiator. At this point, it's lifted with 37s and re-geared with 513 gears. But something is happening. All this time, from age about 25, I've been traveling across the country, sometimes for 2 weeks, sometimes for 68 days on a motorcycle, sometimes for 80 days, a total of probably a year or year and a half of motorcycle travel. Over this time, I am seeing that the looks on people's faces and their demeanor and their friendliness is steeply declining. Now, this is post COVID time, right? And I'm realizing that the experience is not nearly as fun. And while quality of experience is doing this, price is doing this. So price is going up and quality and fun is going down. And I try to ignore it. You know, it's little things. Nobody talks to each other in the gym anymore, except for older people. Thank goodness for people 55, 60 and older. They're friendly. If you're 30, 35-year-old guy or girl or younger, nobody's talking to anybody. Headphones in, nobody's talking. Police are still telling you got to wear a mask, all this stuff. Campgrounds went from $20 to $45 to $65 to $125 for places on the water. These nice resorts, some of them are $160 a night for these RV resorts, which are fine. I mean, hey, if you're older and retired and you want to pay that, go for it. But it just was not fun anymore. And after 6 months, I just realized that the nail in the coffin to the American dream had happened and the world hadn't realized it yet. So sitting in the cold desert, having a blast, riding my bike through the trails at night and hanging out and living my life, I realized that this is just not fun anymore. And the only solution is to find a spot on the map, buy it, build up something for myself, and do my best to build friendship, community, and family there and around that. But where was I to do it? The only place that ever felt really good to me was where I was from, home. And so I packed up the very next day. There's a video where I talk about I'm done. I'm heading home. And I did just that. I came back and within probably within 18 months of being back, I purchased the property that I have now. But it didn't go smoothly. I had began looking at multiple properties and I found the perfect property. And this property was out in the middle of nowhere. It had what I would consider like an RV pad. It had a pond on it. It had all kinds of stuff. There was just 2 issues. The first issue was it was out of my price range. It was 10.5 acres. They were asking $350,000. They had paid $350,000 in 2016. Now this is 2023 when I'm looking. And I consider making them an offer, but I knew they weren't going to take less than what they had paid for it. According to the realtor, I would have offered them less, but I didn't even have that kind of money. With that being said, it was too expensive. And a week later, it'd been on the market for 2 years. A week later, somebody showed up and purchased it for full price. They flew in from South Carolina, saw it, and bought it for full price. Man, oh man, I pined away about that property. I even spoke to my mom. She said, hey, what's wrong? I said, I'm still thinking about that property I lost. She said, well, if it was meant to be, it would have happened. I said, I think I missed out. But as the saying goes, sometimes not getting what you want is an incredible stroke of luck. But you don't realize it at the time, right? And I didn't get that property. And I ended up one rainy, dreary Sunday night, Zillow popped up and showed me a piece of property. And the vision instantly hit me. The property had multiple tiers. It had trees. It had a creek on the back. I could afford it. And I liked the town that it was near. And I said, man, if this thing looks anything like the photos in person, I'm sold. So I went out the very next day. I spoke to the realtor. I went out the next day. I looked at it. It was another foggy, dreary, cold winter day. No leaves on the trees. I said, this is it. This is the one. I put in a fair offer. You know, I didn't lowball them, but I put in a fair offer. They accepted it. Boom, we're good to go. During the 30-day due diligence period or 20 days, whatever I had in there, everything was squared up. Financing was squared away. And we got all the way through it. I kept driving to the property. I would pick up trash and I would just envision things. And I was just very excited, but I never let myself get too excited. And then I realized I was researching the power, and I spoke to a power engineer on site. And he told me, he said, yeah, there's an easement for this property, all this and that. So you'll be good to go. We just got to set the power line up. So he leaves around 12 and I'm closing the next day. And that afternoon at 4:05, I get a voicemail. He says, hey, David, by the way, I wanted to let you know the easement on file has expired. It's no longer there. It's gone. We can't reset that power pole. Your only option right now is to get a brand new easement if you can, or we have to bring it down the driveway, and the estimated distance is 600 feet. It'll be underground, and it'll be about $10,000 to bring it down the driveway, and we got to tear the driveway up to get it down, or the road. That's not good news 12 hours before closing. So I had to go back and retrade the deal on the Rebel Outpost. Now, if you don't know what retrading is not popular. It's when a deal is set and ready to close, and you go back and say, I'm not closing this unless I change the price. People hate a retrader, but I never retraded anybody before because I always stick to my word no matter what, even if it costs me money. But in this case, I found out something that wasn't disclosed, and the realtor had put in the ad, which I screenshotted, and in the listing that the property had electricity. They had a temporary power pole set up, so they made it seem like it did, and it didn't. So I retraded them. And I said, hey, I think the real estate agent was very snarky. Well, what do you want to do? You want to cancel the deal, blah, blah. I wanted to say sure because of his attitude, but I wanted the property. What I did, I broke down the cost of what I thought it would take to bring it down the driveway. I divided it in half to make it seem fair. I said, I need a $5,000 reduction. That's meeting in the middle. If they can do that, I'll see you in the morning. Realtor calls me back in 30 minutes. He said, done deal. We'll reduce the price, sign the papers. The next morning, I bought the property for $5,000 less. I ended up at the end not having to bring the power down the driveway. I was able to re-up the easement at no cost. Thank you to the person that helped me with that. That was a long journey. I had no power for a full year, no access to power. Right at the 1 year mark, almost exactly, I was able to get the easement and the power company and local approval and hook up power. But I had no power for 1 year. But I was able to get the property for $5,000 cheaper because of that site engineer letting me know just before he left work that day. If he'd have waited one more day, I would have missed out on that saving. So everything fell into place. And now I have the Rebel Outpost. Now I have a piece of property that has been graded 4 different times. I have a solar powered well. You can watch my other videos. But all that up and down and around and loss and gain and moving and renting and traveling and living at home, all that brought me to right here. And the most recent reason is because of the way things are going in the world. And I think I need to be independent. I don't want to be paying rent to somebody so I can hear my neighbors yell at each other or stomp on the ceiling or be rude. It's not that I don't like people. I just want to be in my own place, my own space that I can maintain. I do a perimeter check every single night, bright flashlight, gun at my side. I used to do it with my dog. The dog would go with me. We would check the entire perimeter. That's where I want to live. That's where I think I think you as an American who wants to be a homesteader and independent, that's where you should be. So that's my housing evolution. That's where it started at age 21. If you find yourself at any point in that journey, take my advice or my failures or my mistakes and do better. Now, I also, if you watch this video this long, I shared this information because I want to quantify that going forward. If I put out any real estate videos, anything about buying land, buying a house, renting versus buying, any kind of video, I want to quantify and qualify the fact that, I want to qualify the fact that I have been there and I've done it. So unlike some of these people on YouTube who are sitting there trying to just make money, telling you about housing this, housing that, I have borrowed money. I have made money. The 2 houses I sold, I leased them. The 2 houses that I bought, I leased them out for years, helped me pay for a lot of motorcycle trips, and I sold them and made a profit. Not a big one, but I made a profit. And I acquired other properties along the way. And I made it through the recession without losing any properties. I paid that loan back. I took a note out and paid the loan back to the bank month by month. It took me 36 months. So going forward, I will share real estate advice with you, and it's based on experience and experience at a young age. And as I acquire or go through more land and more real estate, I will share that with you along my journey. But for now, I'm here at the Rebel Outpost. My goal is to build this up. Bees, gardening, chickens, self-reliance, solar power, backup systems. That's what we're going to be talking about. Preparing ourselves for what may come. And if nothing happens, we're good to go. But it feels like something's coming, right? That's my housing evolution and how I got to be the very first Rebel Outpost, but hopefully not the last Rebel Outpost in the United States. Hey, thank you for watching. Remember, stay wild, stay free. I'll see you on the next video.